Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. It's coming at the beginning of next year. Early 2020 is what they said. And if you remember, when I first saw this game, I was unsure of it. It sounded like it could be good, but my problem, and I'm sure most of your problems, is that we've heard this story so many times at this point, right? Specifically, like hardcore Dragon Ball Z fans, just Dragon Ball in general, we've seen the story of Goku like so many times throughout just console generations, right? Like whether it's through like Budokai or Tenkaichi, or actually there have been some interesting RPGs, Legend of the Super Saiyan, for example. We had Attack of the Saiyans that was actually pretty good, I would say, on the DS, and there's of course a whole wealth of fighting games. I don't even have to go into those, but to hear about original content in a game that is going to be story driven is interesting. And that's what seems to be happening here with Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I think the name could be better, by the way, but I like Legend of the Super Saiyan. That was a good name, and it's relegated to the Super Nintendo one that isn't even that good of a game, technically, if you look back on it. But to hear more and more about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, it does seem like they've put quite a bit of thought into how they would sell this to hardcore Dragon Ball fans who have heard this story several times. And looking at what I'm hearing, I think this is going to be big for Dragon Ball fans. I really do. Even if you're really into the series, it sounds like it's going to be for you completely. And technically newcomers can jump in and learn everything about, the entire story. Although I assume most likely you're going to buy it because you're at least familiar with something like the Frieza saga, at least I would assume, possibly up through the Cell saga. But some stuff that I wanted to point out is that they are going to be doing their own little branching stories that are original content. Here's a good example. This is from Game Rant, and what's happening here is that one of the side stories that apparently is going to happen is going to be more focus on Gohan and Android 16. Now, of course, we all know at the end of the Cell saga, Gohan transforms into Super Saiyan 2, the first one to do it, and overwhelms Cell completely, only to kind of run into his own issues of his own overconfidence and get into trouble, but eventually blasting him away with a family, I guess you'd say, or him and Goku Kamea wave. But the thing that kind of caught some people off a little bit is we put the puzzle pieces together about why Gohan would become overwhelmed with emotion and turn into a Super Saiyan 2, but it seems like they want to delve into that a little further because there is some time there that they can look into. If you remember, there were several days leading up to the Cell games that they are seemingly going to take advantage of here with one of those unique storylines. This is from Game Rant, being between Gohan and Android 16. I guess building up a relationship so that scene makes more sense. And this is where things I think are going to become interesting for hardcore Dragon Ball fans, specifically ones that maybe are even on YouTube or websites and forums and are trying to figure out power levels and drawing conclusions about things that we haven't really seen yet. And this is supposed to be canon from what I can tell. That's the most interesting part. Stuff in here is actually going to go down as Dragon Ball history. So I was wondering, well, there's some cool stuff that they could go into, but if they could just make it to the Buu saga. If they can make it to the Buu saga, there is a large gap of time between the Cell saga and the Buu saga that they could just make up all kinds of stuff. They could write all kinds of storylines, but I was like, you know what? I think it's going to end at the Cell saga because we haven't really heard much. Well, turns out it's going to go through the Buu saga, it seems. Yeah, I couldn't believe this either. This is good news. This sounds like this game is going to be fairly long then. Going from the beginning of the Saiyan saga with Raditz landing on Earth all the way to the end of the Buu saga will give you a fair amount of gameplay, especially if there are these side missions. So this was actually, if you see here, this was done in an interview with comicbook.com, where Sean Schemmel, who's of course the voice of Goku, legendary voice, of Goku, saying Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is coming out in early 2020. It's an RPG. You can play the entire Dragon Ball Z saga all the way through the Majin Buu saga from beginning to end. Now, I assume that means that he's recorded lines for this game and knows that the Buu saga is in it. I don't think he would just say that without knowing that. It would seem odd that he would have just recorded all these lines that would have fallen into the Buu saga and then, of course, not use them and say, oh, well, I recorded those voice lines, so I assume voiceover, I assume it's good. So it does sound like, yes, we'll be going through the Buu saga, and that's good because there's that, like I said, that long time period between the Cell saga and the Buu saga that I think they could spend time and come up with some cool and interesting storylines. Keep in mind, Gohan went from became much older, obviously, right, to where he's going to high school. But some of the interesting parts that I would like to see actually have to do with Goku. Remember, he spent time in Otherworld. He developed the Super Saiyan 3 technique, the transformation, while he was there, and he just randomly showed up with it. In fact, it really was never really talked about much about how that happened, just that through intense training and events that happened in Otherworld, where time doesn't move, by the way, he was able to develop Super Saiyan 3. And that was always something that I would have liked to have seen more about, because you can probably have some sort of storyline around that, around how he was pushed to his limits in Otherworld and figured out this transformation that is devastating on the body, as it's been described. It's very, it's strenuous on a Saiyan's body to be a Super Saiyan 3, but he figured it out and developed it to the point where we had, obviously, Gotenks become a Super Saiyan 3. That was a big deal at the time, but otherwise we see Super Saiyan 3 used by Goku, and that's pretty much it. We see, like Dragon Ball Heroes and stuff, we see others turn into Super Saiyan 3, but that's not canon, obviously, and that turns into more fan fiction, really, is what that leans towards. But I like the idea of them telling interesting side stories. You have the entire time where Gohan's growing up. How did he fall out of training? What happened? How did Vegeta cope with civilian life, right? Maybe they can even dive into more about how Vegeta transformed into his Super Saiyan transformation for the first time. We saw some snippets about that, but like really dive into it. Maybe have some sort of side mission or level around that, right? Maybe they dive into that 3-year period when they're waiting for the androids to show up. There are some interesting stuff they could do. Maybe they get into when Goku learned the instant transmission. There was that time period where he was trying to get back to Earth, right? And then Trunks showed up. They could show his entire time of recovery there. I'm thinking of all these different things they could do, and it makes me really interested in this game. Not necessarily because of the story we know, but the story we could learn about with this. And as a Dragon Ball fan who's waiting for Dragon Ball Super to eventually come back after the Broly movie we saw, and I'm sitting here like ready for more Dragon Ball. This might be what I should get for that. So I was already going to pick it up because I'm a Dragon Ball fan, but now I'm hearing about all these ideas and possibly original storylines, and it's fun. I'm ready for it. Early 2020. All right. PS4, Xbox One, PC. I guess I'll probably grab it on, Xbox One X. That makes sense. I assume it'll have enhancements for it, so I'll grab it on there. Let me know what you guys think about, though, for Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and the idea of it, one, going from seemingly the Saiyan saga with Raditz landing all the way to the end of the Buu saga. We know that story. But where would you like to see, I guess, kind of expanded on for the storylines? And it seems to be with any character, because you're going to be controlling several different characters outside of just Goku. So let me know what you guys think down below. I'll see you next time.